Hey, welcome to the Family Answer Man podcast. Today's episode is all about fatherhood from a biblical worldview. I'm David Ortis, and I am your host. I'm here with Dr. Mark Crosby, pastor, educator, marriage and family therapist, and our resident expert on the Family Answer Man podcast. Now, each week we tackle tough questions that face families and discuss practical solutions that really do work. So, if you take a second, subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell. You'll never miss an episode of the Family Answer Man. And if you're listening on a podcast, take a moment to follow and rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. If our content has helped you at all, please share it with your family and with your friends so that they can join us on this journey of building stronger, healthier, and happier families. Well, Dr. Mark, it's good to be here with you today and talking about the topic of fatherhood, which is something that about 40% of people in the world will experience is becoming a father.
Yes.
So fatherhood, and when we look at what makes a good father, and we talk about this topic, especially around the Father's Day holiday,
Right.
If you had to put on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being this is the easiest thing that's ever happened, 10 being this can be the most difficult thing that's ever happened, where would you rank fatherhood on the scale?
Probably
of
around 9.
All right, there we go.
No, fatherhood is I think one of the most important things that we can do as men, and we need to do it well, and we need to do it right, because again, I think our society reflects how we parent. And Dr. James Dobson and many others have said over the years that Western civilization is dependent upon how well men father their children, how well men parent their children, how well men instruct their children, coach their children, are there for their children. And that, again, if we do not do our job well, then the family, the culture, the society begins to break down. And many will argue that in the last 25 to 35 years, fatherhood has taken a nosedive in many areas of our culture, especially in certain populations. And because of that, we're seeing crime go up. We're seeing suicide go up. We're seeing just a lot of division. We're seeing the courts packed and full of cases of families that are falling apart. And many will argue that this lays at the feet of the father. If the father truly is to be the leader, if the father truly is to be the proverbial man of the house, then again, these problems are falling at the feet of the father. And so fatherhood is especially important. It is extremely important to the lives of our children and their overall development. And if we don't do it right, and if we don't do it well, then the results could be catastrophic.
Yeah, and like you said, you have, if our listeners don't know, you are a family mediator.
Correct.
So you do a lot of work with families in the courtroom,
Right.
and
That's
so
right.
you see a lot of this where fatherhood not done properly can be so devastating.
Exactly. And so again, the reality, once again, as we've said this before, is that if you do not know what you're doing as a dad, then you could make a lot of serious mistakes. So we're going to make mistakes anyway.
Right.
But if you're not, again, being cognizant of what your responsibilities are as a father, then you're going to say some things and do some things or neglect some things that are extremely essential and could be impactful for years and decades to come.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to hop into our question for the day. Our question that was written in says, sometimes I feel like a failure as a dad. So what is the secret to being a good father?
Yeah, and the reality is that I think every man who is conscientious about his parenting, there are going to be moments when you feel like a failure.
Right.
Okay. I mean, we're going to say the wrong thing. We're not going to respond the right way. We're going to give a wrong answer. We're going to let our temper or our anger sometimes override, what is, kind and gracious. And so those things are going to happen. We're going to put our kids off in those special opportunities where we should be, embracing and inviting and accepting their invitation, if you will. And so we're going to have those moments where we feel like a failure. But I think overall, there are certain things that we can do and be mindful of. And there are 10 things, if you will, that I think are very important. And so for the dads who are listening, for the pastors who are listening, this may be something you could share from your pulpit in your church. And also for the dads who are listening, especially, there's some things that maybe you can write down, hopefully memorize. But there's 10 things I would say that every dad needs to incorporate in their parenting. Number one, I would say this: dads, be flexible. Flexibility, I will argue, is essential to fatherhood, because the alternative to flexibility is being tense and rigid and irritable. And here's what I know: when you're tense, when you're irritable, and when you're rigid, that destroys the connection with your child.
Yeah.
Because children live in a very fluid world, if you will. In other words, they will go from wanting to play sports 1 minute outdoors to wanting to do something indoors. They're wanting to have donuts 1 minute to having a sandwich the next minute. And the list could go on. And so you have to be flexible. You have to kind of roll with them.
Yeah.
And if not, if you're rigid, if you're tense, if you're irritated, it's really going to stifle their creativity. It's going to stifle their imagination. It's going to stifle, some of the things they find enjoyable and interesting. And so learning how to be flexible with your children, I think, is very, very important. But if the rules are extremely rigid, if the rules, create this tense environment, if the rules create this irritation in your home, then the children are going to suffer. So again, I'm not saying don't have rules. Definitely have rules.
Right.
Definitely have boundaries. Definitely have, the home rules, the house rules, if you will. But you've got to learn how to be flexible. You've got to recognize and realize their attention span is very short. You have to learn and realize and recognize that, what they may want on Monday, but they may not want on Tuesday. Okay. and so learning how to be flexible, I think, is crucial.
Well, that's such a good point, and I'm glad that's number one on the list, because that takes so much work.
Yeah.
But like you said, it really sets the table, I think, for everything else.
Yeah. And I think we need to be mindful of that. We need to ask ourselves sometimes when we're raising our kids, what's the hurry? Our children need to spend time being children. Our teenagers need to spend time being teenagers. I will never forget, my grandfather said years ago when I was thinking about, hey, I want a job, I want to work, I want a job. He goes, that's great, and we want you to work. Yeah. However, he said this: once you start working, you never stop.
Never stop.
So he basically was saying was, enjoy this moment, in your early teen years, enjoy this moment, because once you start working, you never stop. And again, he put me to work on the farm, as I talked about the other day, and I worked, I cleaned out his barns and things of that nature, and that was good. But the reality is, you have to ask yourself, what's the hurry? And so also be careful of allowing your kids to grow up too fast, too soon. Again, we want them to mature, we want them to grow, we want them to develop, by all means, but be careful, because sometimes I think we live in a time where we want our kids to grow up too fast, too soon. So ask yourself again, what's the hurry? So being flexible, I think, is very important. Number two, be kind to their mother. This is very important to note, because kids notice and they're impacted by the relationship between mom and dad. Yeah. And even if mom and dad are divorced, even if mom and dad live in separate homes, being kind to the mother is very important, because again, most kids see father as, in most cases, being stronger, being taller, being larger, if you will. And they also see that sometimes dads can use that to their advantage, so to speak, and become harsh or mean-spirited or threatening. And that impacts the life of the child. And so even if they're living together under the same roof, but especially if they're living in different homes, be kind to their mom. Yeah. I heard years and years ago from an old mentor who said, the greatest thing you can do for a child is to be good to their mother. And so that always, basically just really resonated with me. So be kind to their mom. Number three, again, be mindful of the fact that your children need your time. Yeah. Children need time. Again, I've heard time and time again, this may sound a little cliche, but I think it's true, but children spell love Time.
Ooh, say that again.
Children spell love Time. Yep. So the more time you spend with your child, the more they recognize and realize that you love them. And this is true at all ages and stages in life. This is true when they are toddlers. This is true when they are children in the fourth grade. This is true when they become, teenagers. This is true when they start driving. But at all ages and stages in life, time is important. And I will argue this: in the early stages of their life, get them into your world. In other words, let them know what you find interesting, what you find important. Take them fishing, take them hunting, take them to the ball game, take them to the baseball park. Take them to whatever it is that you find enjoyable. But as they get older, get into their world.
Yeah, switch.
You got to switch it, because here's the thing. You may love football, but they may love basketball. Mm-hmm. You may love basketball. They may love baseball or whatever. So get into their world. You may love individual sports, like boxing or jiu-jitsu or tennis or golf. They may love team sports, or right opposite. You may love team sports. They may want to do something, as an individual. So in other words, get into their world. They may love mechanics. You may love, gardening or whatever, but get into their world, do mechanics, learn mechanics. They may love music. You may love, outdoor sports. Okay, but get into their world, because the more you're in their world, the more they realize and recognize that you care about who they are and where they are. So that's so important. I meet so many dads over the years that basically, they're telling their kids, I know you like basketball, but we're a football family. Okay. Or whatever. Or I know you love music, but I want you to learn how to, change a carburetor or whatever. And that may be fine. Those are good things. But eventually you have to get into their world. Yeah. Because if a kid loves music and he doesn't love mechanics, you're basically going to create this tension between the two of you.
Yeah, and tension's not healthy.
And no, of course not. Tension is not. You want that flexibility, like we said at the very beginning. You want to be able to get into their world and figure out what is it that they enjoy. I know when we're raising, our middle child, our son, I kept saying to my wife, when he finds his niche, he'll be fine. And she kept saying, when's he going to find his niche? I said, it's going to take a while, but he'll eventually find his niche. And when he does, he'll be fine. He found his niche and he's doing great. Fourthly, your child needs coaching. And that means simply this. We all know Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way they should go. We could easily translate that word train up to coaching. Yeah. It's simply the same thing. But your child needs coaching. What does that mean? What's coaching? Well, if you look at any coach, whether they're a professional coach or an amateur coach, it's the same thing in many cases. But the point is that they need instruction. Mm-hmm. They need to know what it is you want from them. Number two, they need to rehearse it. If this is what you want from them and they're not quite sure how to do it, then rehearse it and rehearse it. That's called practice. Then give them the opportunity to engage in what it is that you want them to do. And then review it. How well did you do? How did you feel about it? Did you do it well? Where can we improve? And then repeat it. So coaching is something that I think many parents forget about doing. Right. Many parents want to give instruction and walk away. But if you don't rehearse it, and if you don't allow them to engage in it, if you don't review what they've done, and if you don't repeat it, they will never really get the skill that is needed to do it.
Right. And that's why coaching is such a great analogy, because coach doesn't just draw up the play on the whiteboard. You got to do drills. You got to get reps. Exactly. You got to watch tape after the game. Right. You're doing all the things that you just talked about.
Exactly. If you want that 12-year-old, that 13-year-old, ever how old, to cut your grass. Mm-hmm. Okay. Here's how you cut the grass.
Here's how to do it. That's right.
Here's how you start the lawnmower. This is how you go up and down or do the square or whatever your style is of cutting grass. And then you rehearse it with them. Yeah. You kind of look over their shoulder. Then you allow them to cut the grass by themselves. And then you review it. What kind of job do you do? Are there, all sorts of, patches in the yard? And then, so how do you, change that? And then you get them to repeat it. Yeah. And then eventually they'll cut the grass, in a way that is appropriate and pleasing to you. Number 5. This is one that I think we should all be mindful of. It's basically, as some would say, a no-brainer, but it's something that I don't see often enough, and that is keep fun in the family. Keep fun in the family. Yes, we're called to work together. Wash the car together. Yes, cut the grass together. Yes, do dishes together, whatever. But also play together and even laugh together. Children want to know, even teenagers want to know, hey, that we can have fun in our family. And so keeping fun in the family, whatever that may look like, but definitely carve out some time, especially during the summer months, where you can go on that vacation, or you can go to the beach, or you can go to the mountains, or you can take that fishing trip, or go to that baseball game, whatever it is you like to do, but really learn how to have fun in the family. Have the outdoor backyard picnic or whatever, celebrate the 4th of July by doing something that's fun for the kids, but keep fun in the family.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said to carve out time, because fun doesn't just happen. happen.
No.
You got to be intentional about making it happen.
Yeah, and so, yeah, you have to be creative, and then once again, you have to figure out what's fun for them. If fun for you is just sitting on the beach watching the waves come in, that may be one thing, but for your kids, it may be building a sandcastle. Okay, it may be riding the waves on their flotation devices, whatever it may be. But get involved with them. Have fun in your family. Number 6, be authentic. Be authentic. In other words, be willing to own your mistakes. Be willing to say to your son or daughter, look, I messed up. I wasn't listening. I wasn't thinking. I overreacted. But learn how to be authentic. Learn how to apologize. Learn how to explain your limits, to your kids. But the main thing is be authentic. The moment we put ourselves on so high a pedestal that we basically project to our family that we're perfect and we never make mistakes is the moment we come crashing down pretty hard. And so be authentic, to your family, to your wife, to your kids. Apologize, forgive, seek forgiveness, etc.
Yeah, it's a question I've heard a lot is, should you apologize to your kids? So what you're saying is, especially for dads, which can be difficult to do, it's okay to apologize to your kids.
For example, and I'll just kind of give a little personal example from yesterday. Yesterday, my little granddaughter had a dance recital. And I was supposed to go and meet them after the recital to have dinner. But there was a storm that came through, knocked some limbs and trees and power lines over our road, and we couldn't make it.
Oh, man.
Couldn't make it. And so she knew this, and I said to her, afterward they cleared it, they were able to come home. Hey, look, I am so sorry. Papa couldn't be there. Yeah. And she says, I know, it's not a problem. I got this, brought her flowers, whatever, congratulated her. But my point is that sometimes things happen, and sometimes it may be our fault. Sometimes maybe something we cannot help. In either way, I think it's okay because our kids know when we've messed up.
Yes, they do.
Our kids know when we, lost, our temper. Our kids know that we said things we shouldn't have said. And sometimes we have to be mindful of that and be willing to be authentic and to apologize. Number 7, I would say this: keep rules to a minimum. In other words, don't become a Pharisee. What I mean by that is this: yes, there should be family rules.
Okay.
Yes, but the reality is God gave 10 commandments, and the Pharisees added 613 to them. Okay.
It's a little extra.
Okay. And so you begin to see that, again, the Pharisees, made rules on top of rules to keep the rules, to keep the rules, to keep the rules from breaking the rules.
Right.
And what happens is that creates such restriction that tears down the flexibility. That's where people start saying that we're all walking on eggshells. So yeah, you have to have rules in the family. Yeah, you have to have, curfews. Yes, you have to have bedtime moments. You have to have, times that you cannot do this and we don't allow that into our home, whatever. Okay, got it. But you got to keep these rules to a minimum. Otherwise, everything you say or do could be wrong. And children struggle with that. Children struggle with walking on eggshells. They struggle with, the fear of consequences if I don't do everything according to the book.
Yeah.
And this is why, again, I keep saying flexibility is so very powerful, so very important. So again, keep rules to a minimum. Number 8, as your kids get older, say yes as often as you can, unless you have a good reason to say no.
That's great advice.
I think that's important because if you don't, and look, some of our listening audience out there maybe had a parent that said no just for the sake of saying no.
Right.
Before you got the question out of your mouth, they were already automatically saying no. And many people out there I know can relate to that. And so what happens when you do that is kids begin to sneak around. They begin to have the mindset, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission or whatever.
Right.
And so if you say yes as often as you possibly can, unless you have a good reason to say no, most children will begin to recognize that mom and dad are going to work with me, or maybe you may have to compromise. I mean, for example, there's some parents, and I understand this, who are a little leery about having their kids go over to a sleepover, for example. But maybe you can say, look, I tell you what, instead of having a sleepover, I'll pick you up at 11 o'clock.
Right.
That's a compromise. You still get to go, still get to be with your friends, still get to tell the stories and hang out and have the, hot dogs or whatever, watch the movies. But when everybody else is getting ready to go to bed, we'll pick you up at 11 or whatever. So compromise, but learn how to say yes, unless you have a good reason to say no.
Well, the more you say yes, the more effective your no actually becomes.
Well, exactly. And so exactly. And so when they realize that mom and dad are not killjoys, that mom and dad will allow me to do certain things. Mom and dad will allow me, to explore and to enjoy and to be involved in things that are important to me, unless there's a good reason to say no.
Right. Not just it's inconvenient for me, so I'm going to say no.
Right. Exactly.
Because that happens a lot.
Oh, yeah.
It really does.
We say no because of inconvenience. And what that does is it really kind of crushes, in many cases, the child's desire to involve you or to be a part of something, because they'll say, I can't do it because I know my dad's going to say no. I know my dad's going to say no. Right. So dads, if you say, I'm going to say yes, let's have a good reason to say no. We'll make this happen because I know it's important to you. That I think is powerful. Number 9, failures are not the end of the world for you or for your children.
Failures are not the end of the world.
Failures are not the end of the world. You're going to fail. They're going to fail, but you just simply say, next play, let's move on, let's keep going, let's try this again, let's start over, let's try something different. This didn't work, this door closed, God had a reason, whatever. But again, failure is not the end of the world for you or for them. And that's important for, I think, children to understand and for dads to understand, because dads, we're going to fail. There's only perfect men or perfect dads. Yeah. And that leaves me out. Okay. and so we're going to fail. But again, recognizing it's not the end of the world, recognizing that your kids are going to fail. They're going to, fail the test. They're not going to make the football team. They're not going to get the scholarship. They're going to be 1 point short of tops or whatever it may be, and they're going to fail, but it's not the end of the world for you or for them.
Well, in failure, for kids and for us as dads, a failure does not define us as failures.
Exactly.
A failure is something that happens, something that maybe we come up short, but it doesn't define who we are.
Exactly.
Which God gives us a different definition, which does not include failure.
Exactly. And sometimes failure is the result of consequences. We didn't study for that exam. Right. We didn't train off season, to make the team in the fall or whatever. We didn't, do what we're supposed to do on the job, for our first part-time job, and we didn't, we weren't asked to continue working for them, over the summer, whatever it may be. And so sometimes failures are a part of our own consequences. And so we need to be mindful of that and sometimes learn from that. And we need to work harder on the job or train for the sporting event or, study for the exam so that we don't, continue this pattern. Number 10, and this is, so very important, and that is, let your children know what you believe, who Jesus is. You pray, you worship, you have Bible study. The Bible says, that when your kids rise up in the morning, when they go to bed at night, you should be talking to them about the Lord, and not preaching at them necessarily, but hey, what's the Lord doing in your life? Or let me tell you what the Lord did. Or let me tell you how the Lord opened this door. Let me tell you how God really blessed us today. Or let me tell you what God, how He came through for us. Encouraging that and incorporating that into your life. So with that being said, we have about 3 real quick case studies that you brought to our attention that I want to kind of share with you. One case study, and again, for those of you who are kind of following along, one case study basically says that my 8-year-old daughter is extremely rude to my 6-year-old. The 6-year-old adores the big sister. Mom is apparently also getting the brunt of the 8-year-old's anger. The 8-year-old's blaming the mom for the separation. And so what can we do? And so this is just a quick answer to that case. And that is this: children who are chronically angry are usually struggling with depression. And we need to be mindful of that. So obviously this 8-year-old little girl is struggling due to the separation of their family. And so because of the separation, depression, which is very common, is now happening. But here the 8-year-old is bullying the little sister. Number 1, let her know you don't like it. As a dad, let her know that's not how we do things. That's not how we roll, if you will. Number 2, spend time with her, having and hearing her story. Let her unpack her story. Let her unpack what's going on inside of her. Let her unpack, the frustration or the fear that she feels because of the separation. And then thirdly, in the situation, this 8-year-old who's bullying her little sister, share the benefits of change. In other words, hey, we're going to stop bullying your little sister, and if we stop doing that, here are some things that I will do for you. Here are some opportunities I'll give you. Here are some blessings. But also let her know that if you don't stop bullying your little sister, here are going to be some consequences that are going to occur and they're going to happen. And so letting her know this is your choice.
Nice.
In case number 2, real quickly, there is a letter that came in that basically said, and I love this one, basically my 3-year-old will not stop interrupting by asking the question why. 100 times a day at least. When I'm talking to my wife about something, I can't even get across what I'm trying to say because I'm interrupted 20 times with, what did you say? What are you talking about? Can I have? And many, many other occasions. Basically, this dad says, I cannot hear myself think. What can I do? So the nonstop talking 3-year-old who is asking why, what's going on? Number one, this 3-year-old is processing the world. And so they're processing the world by saying or asking the question why. And so here's the thing. I know they're annoying, but give them some attention and begin to answer some of these questions. You don't have to answer everyone, but again, you need to help them to process their world. Number 2, give them some instruction on how to wait and create some boundaries. Letting them know that sometimes mommy and daddy are talking and sometimes you need to wait for a minute and basically say, hey, if I give you this hand signal, that means wait. And practice that. Practice that. Yeah. And they will begin to learn. Create, fourthly, a diversion. Give them something to do while you're talking to their mother. Give them, a chore. Give them a toy. Give them, some bubbles, to play with or whatever. But create a diversion. Fourthly, always carve out some time when you're finished talking to mom and basically try to hear where they are or hear what they're wanting to know. The last case study, which is very, very complex, and so we're going to have to give just a moment to it, though, and that is the case study where you have a severe autistic child and you're concerned about their salvation. The Bible says that we are called to expose our children to the gospel. So exposure to the things of God, even a severely autistic child, through music, through Bible studies, through prayer, being proactive rather than reactive, to your child. But let them learn how to sing the songs of the gospel, the songs that lift up the name of Jesus, lift up, the songs, on the radio in worship privately, have the radio on, if you will, the CDs that are really fun to listen to, and just let them sing about the Lord. Give them Bible stories at night. Put Bible stories on their tablets, if you will. Spend time in prayer with them. 1 Corinthians 7:14 basically speaks to the importance of parents who are believers who expose their child to God's amazing grace. Give them opportunity to believe with the knowledge and faith that they can indeed process. And I think as we do that, God will honor that and God will bless that. But if we do these things as dads, then I'll believe that one day we'll be able to look in the mirror and say, you know what? I didn't do it all right, and there were times when I failed, but I really gave my children what I felt like God wanted me to do for them and give to them. And I think they will recognize it and bless you for it.
Well, thanks for joining us today on the Family Answer Man. And as always, you can get in touch with us at Family Answer Man at liveoak.church. We hope that this episode of the Family Answer Man has encouraged you, to inspired you to make changes that will lead to stronger, healthier, and happier family.